In the wealthiest country on earth, dozens of thousands of families lose everything, not because of poor choices, but because they got sick. Behind this staggering number lies a deeper truth, a truth about an industry that's supposed to heal, but instead profits from pain, an industry that spends more on marketing than research, that manipulates science, monopolizes medicine, and ensures that for every patient saved, millions more remain dependent. This isn't just about high drug prices. It's about a system designed to keep you sick. It's about how modern medicine became a subscription model, and you're the customer for life. They tell us it's about innovation, about life-saving treatments, about miracles of science. And yes, there are real breakthroughs, real hope. But buried underneath those headlines is a business model so effective, so ruthless, that it's made illness one of the most profitable products in human history. Today, we pull back the curtain on the pharmaceutical industry. We're not just talking about corruption. We're talking about a machine built to extract value from suffering. This is the dark truth behind Big Pharma. And it begins with a simple, devastating idea. What if the system was never meant to make you healthy? The medical system is not broken. It's built to operate this way. From the very first day of medical school, doctors are trained to diagnose and treat disease. They memorize symptoms, pathways, and pharmaceutical solutions. Their education is rooted in pathology, what goes wrong with the human body. But what's missing is just as important. They don't learn how to keep people well. They don't study health. They study illness, and that's not a flaw in the system, it's the foundation. Because every diagnosed illness creates a new customer. Every prescription written becomes a financial transaction. And as long as that condition persists, especially if it's chronic, it guarantees long-term revenue. This isn't just medicine, it's a business model, one that doesn't benefit from curing disease. It benefits from controlling it. That's why we're surrounded by medication. It's not just in hospitals or pharmacies, it's on TV, in magazine ads, on podcasts, in social media feeds, brightly colored packaging, catchy names. Ask your doctor about has become a cultural mantra, and it works. The United States and New Zealand are the only countries in the world where direct-to-consumer pharmaceutical advertising is legal. In those countries, patients are encouraged to self-diagnose and request drugs by brand name. What used to be a private medical decision is now a marketing opportunity. And if you don't have a diagnosis yet, the system is ready to give you one. The more you consume this messaging, the more you start to believe that health means being medicated. If your cholesterol is high, there's a pill. If your mood is low, there's a pill. If you gain weight, lose sleep, feel anxious, can't focus, there's a pill. But rarely is the question asked, what's causing these symptoms? Because root causes are complicated. They often require lifestyle changes, environmental improvements, community support, or preventive strategies that don't generate profit. What does generate profit is treatment. Repeatable, scalable, lifelong treatment. And that's exactly what the system provides. We are now living in a society where managing disease is more lucrative than curing it. And when you follow the money, it becomes painfully clear healing is not the goal. Even more disturbing is how the same companies that profit from treatment also contribute to the problem upstream. Many of the largest pharmaceutical conglomerates have deep financial ties to the processed food industry. Their executives sit on boards of major corporations that produce refined sugar, bleached flour, hydrogenated oils, and addictive, nutritionally empty products that flood the global market. These foods are linked directly to metabolic disorders, obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and inflammation, the very conditions that create demand for pharmaceutical intervention. They profit when you eat, they profit when you get sick. And they profit while you try to manage it. This is not a conspiracy, it's a structure, one where prevention is unprofitable and sickness is a multi-billion-dollar industry. So when we talk about healthcare, we're not really talking about health. We're talking about disease control, funded by your dependency. And this dependency is fed by more than just medicine. It's fed by the illusion of scientific certainty, by clinical trials that appear rigorous and unbiased, but often serve corporate interests more than public well-being. In the next section, we'll dive into the heart of that illusion, where science is funded, filtered, and finessed to deliver not truth, but results that sell. When people think of pharmaceutical science, they picture lab coats, strict protocols, and peer-reviewed journals. They imagine precision, ethics, objectivity. But in reality, what appears to be neutral science is often carefully shaped to serve one purpose: profit. Let's start with how drugs are approved. In many cases, medications are not developed to cure a disease, but to manage its symptoms. A drug that lowers blood sugar might get approved without addressing the actual long-term complications of diabetes. A pill might reduce anxiety levels on a scale, but do nothing to improve quality of life. This creates the illusion of effectiveness while leaving the root causes untouched. This isn't just a flaw in how trials are run. It's a deliberate strategy. Pharmaceutical companies often design studies to target biomarkers, not actual outcomes. If a drug can tweak a number, like cholesterol or serotonin, it's considered a success, even if the patient's life doesn't meaningfully improve. Because what matters in the industry is measurable data, not human experience. Now let's talk about what happens behind closed doors. Around 50% of all clinical trials, especially those with negative or inconclusive results, are never published. They disappear into corporate filing cabinets, never reaching the public, doctors, or medical journals. This selective reporting creates a false impression that most drugs are highly effective, when in fact, many may be no better than a placebo. What's worse is how little oversight exists after a drug is released. Once a medication hits the market, its long-term effectiveness is rarely tracked. There is no system that routinely checks whether a drug actually improves lives over time, unless it causes severe, visible harm. And even then, responses are slow and often defensive. But before any of that happens, trials begin with recruitment, and that's where manipulation becomes even more dangerous. Pharmaceutical studies often cherry-pick participants. They choose the healthiest possible patients, non-smokers, within a narrow BMI range, with no complicating conditions. Real-world patients, people with complex medical histories, different body types, or multiple prescriptions, are systematically excluded. Women are also heavily underrepresented. Many trials are still male-dominated, despite the fact that biological sex can affect how a drug works. Hormonal differences, metabolism, and immune response all play roles, but they're often ignored. The result? Drugs are approved for the general population based on testing that doesn't reflect the real population. One study revealed that fewer than 25% of people prescribed the antidepressant citalopram would have qualified for the clinical trials that led to its approval. That means 3 out of 4 people taking it today were never represented in the original testing. Even more alarming, when pharmaceutical companies fund a study, which they often do, the outcome becomes predictable. Industry-funded research is 30% more likely to report favorable results than independent studies. This isn't just a coincidence, it's baked into the process. From the way protocols are written, to how data is interpreted, to the selective publication of outcomes, every step can be subtly influenced to serve a commercial goal. In 2010, a comprehensive review by German researchers found that pharmaceutical companies routinely shaped study designs to favor their own products. It's not always explicit manipulation. Sometimes it's about adjusting the dosage, excluding outlier data, or using soft endpoints that are easier to hit. This creates a situation where even the most well-meaning doctors are working from distorted information. They rely on published research to guide treatment decisions, unaware that the evidence has been filtered through layers of commercial interest. This is not a failure of science, it's the weaponization of science. And it's happening at the foundation of modern medicine. Manipulated research becomes the bedrock of policy, prescription, and public trust. But it doesn't end in the lab or the journal. The distortion continues into the legal system, the marketplace, and the global supply of medicine. Because once a drug is approved, the next battle begins: how to keep it exclusive. Once a drug is approved, the focus shifts from science to strategy. The question is no longer, does it work? But how long can we keep it profitable? In theory, patents exist to reward innovation. They give inventors exclusive rights for a limited time so they can recover research costs and profit from their discovery. But in the pharmaceutical industry, that noble idea has been twisted into a tool for long-term domination. Most people assume drug patents last 20 years, but in practice, pharmaceutical companies stretch that window far longer, sometimes up to 40 years. Using a collection of legal maneuvers designed to block competition and keep prices high. This is where we enter the world of patent monopolies. One of the most common tactics is called evergreening. Companies make small, often insignificant tweaks to a drug, changing the dosage, the delivery method, or the formulation, and then file new patents on those changes. Each new patent resets the clock and extends the monopoly. Another trick is pay for delay. When a generic manufacturer tries to enter the market, the original company sues them for patent infringement. Then, instead of fighting it out in court, they settle. The generic agrees to stay off the market for several more years in exchange for a payout. The result? No competition, no price drop. Everyone wins. except the patient. Then there's the orphan drug loophole. If a company claims a drug treats a rare disease, it can qualify for up to 7 additional years of exclusivity, even if the drug is already being used off-label for more common conditions. This is how companies turn niche applications into billion-dollar blockbusters. They also file dozens, sometimes hundreds, of overlapping patents on a single drug, forming what's known as a patent thicket. This strategy makes it almost impossible for generics to navigate the legal maze without triggering a lawsuit. Take Humira, one of the best-selling drugs in the world. It's used to treat arthritis, Crohn's disease, and other autoimmune conditions. The original patent was supposed to expire years ago, but through evergreening and legal stacking, the manufacturer secured 132 separate patents, extending exclusivity until 2041. That's nearly 2 decades beyond what most people assume is allowed. This kind of monopoly protection doesn't reflect innovation. It reflects corporate strategy, and it comes at a devastating cost to patients. As long as a company holds exclusive rights, it can set the price as high as the market will bear. No generics, no alternatives, no relief. But here's what Big Pharma doesn't want you to see. What happens when those patents finally expire? The price doesn't just drop, it collapses. Lipitor, once the world's top-selling cholesterol drug, generated $5 billion a year in revenue. After generics entered the market, that number fell to just $76 million. Not because demand disappeared, but because the price finally reflected the actual cost of production. Seroquel, a popular antipsychotic, dropped in price by 98.5% after its patent expired. The same drug, the same formula, but no longer protected by a legal monopoly. These price collapses expose the lie. They reveal the true scale of pharmaceutical markups and how long patients are forced to overpay. So when companies say they need patent protection to fund research, remember this: most of that money isn't going back into R&D. It's going into marketing, legal battles, lobbying, and shareholder returns. The patent system, as it stands, isn't about innovation anymore. It's about insulation from competition, from pricing pressure, and from accountability. But this game of monopolies and delay tactics is only part of the story, because while drugs are kept artificially expensive, another brutal reality unfolds. Many patients can't afford them at all, and the consequences go far beyond inconvenience. They lead to desperation, suffering, and for hundreds of thousands, financial ruin. That's the cost of exclusivity. And it's what we confront next. Behind every overpriced pill is a story of someone forced to make an impossible choice. In the United States, over 530,000 people filed for bankruptcy last year due to medical bills. That's more than 500,000 lives financially devastated, not by reckless spending, not by poor planning, but by trying to stay alive. These aren't isolated cases. This is a crisis baked into the structure of American healthcare, and the pharmaceutical industry plays a starring role. When life-saving drugs are priced at thousands or even millions of dollars per year, insurance coverage isn't always enough. Deductibles, co-pays, non-covered prescriptions, and out-of-network providers pile up fast. Patients quickly find themselves buried in debt, forced to drain savings, sell assets, or choose between medication and food. It's not just the elderly or unemployed. Middle-class families with jobs and insurance are being wiped out by the cost of staying alive. Take Zolgensma, a drug used to treat spinal muscular atrophy. It costs $2.1 million for a single dose, even for families with insurance. That price creates logistical, legal, and emotional chaos. The question becomes not, can we treat our child, but can we afford to? This is what happens when health is sold as a product. The more desperate the need, the higher the price. And while some of the most expensive drugs do treat rare conditions, the majority of medical bankruptcies aren't caused by exotic diseases. They're caused by everyday issues: diabetes, heart disease, cancer, asthma, conditions that are common, ongoing, and heavily medicated. And with each refill, the debt grows. The cruelty of this system isn't just in the pricing, it's in the design, because the cost isn't just financial, it's psychological, it's emotional. Imagine rationing insulin because you can't afford your full prescription. Imagine skipping doses of chemotherapy to keep the electricity on. These aren't extreme hypotheticals. They're daily decisions for millions of Americans. And the consequences aren't always survival. In some cases, people die, not because a treatment doesn't exist, but because it was priced out of reach. And while patients suffer, pharmaceutical companies thrive. They post record profits. Their executives collect multi-million-dollar bonuses. Their shareholders grow wealthier, quarter after quarter, all while families downsize, sell their homes, or declare bankruptcy because they dared to get sick. This isn't healthcare, it's extortion with a lab coat. And it's made worse by the fact that many of these drugs were developed with public funding. Universities, taxpayer grants, and government research agencies often lay the groundwork for breakthrough treatments. Then, private corporations take over, patent the results, and set prices with no accountability to the public who helped create them. You paid to develop the drug, then you paid again to use it. And if you can't afford it, the system will punish you for that too. Meanwhile, politicians who could fix this remain silent because Big Pharma spends billions lobbying lawmakers, funding political campaigns, and flooding media channels with ads. They control the narrative. They frame criticism as ungrateful or even dangerous, and in doing so, they protect a system that bankrupts the sick and rewards the greedy. It's a system built not just on medicine, but on desperation, where the ability to pay determines who lives and who loses everything. And in that desperation, price becomes unanchored from reason. Some drugs, no matter how essential, are given price tags that defy logic or ethics. There's something pharmaceutical companies don't like to talk about, something that quietly happens once their legal protections run out, once the exclusivity ends and generics finally step into the market. Prices crash, dramatically, instantly, and with no change in the chemistry, the manufacturing, or the delivery of the drug itself. This is where the illusion breaks. Take Lipitor, for years the best-selling cholesterol medication in the world. When it was under patent, it brought in over $5 billion annually. But as soon as generics became available, revenue dropped to $76 million. That's not a price correction, it's an economic confession. It tells us what the drug should have cost all along. Or look at Seroquel, an antipsychotic prescribed for schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and sometimes even sleep. After its patent expired, the price dropped by 98.5%. The same exact pill, now available for a fraction of the cost. What changed? Not the science, not the ingredients, just the profit barrier finally collapsing. These examples are not rare. They're the rule. The moment generics arrive, the market resets, revealing how inflated prices were under patent protection. The truth is, the cost of most medications has very little to do with research, development, or production. It has everything to do with market control. During the exclusivity period, companies can charge whatever they want because they can. There's no competition, no price pressure, and most patients have no other options. It's a system where price is divorced from value, where necessity is leveraged against the sick. And while some argue that these high prices are needed to recoup research investments, the math doesn't hold up. A large portion of pharmaceutical R&D is publicly funded through taxpayer dollars, grants, and university research. Yet the rewards of those discoveries are privatized. Companies take breakthroughs developed with public money, patent them, and sell them back to the public at a premium. It's a rigged loop. Socialize the risk, privatize the reward. Meanwhile, the actual manufacturing cost of most pills is astonishingly low, pennies in some cases. But when wrapped in layers of legal exclusivity, marketing, and branding, those pennies become hundreds or thousands of dollars per dose. This isn't about innovation. It's about how long a company can sustain the illusion that their product is worth the price they've assigned it. And that illusion is maintained through fear of competition, of transparency, of accountability. That's why pharmaceutical giants fight so aggressively to block generics. Because the moment generic versions hit the shelves, their pricing power evaporates. But beyond the numbers, these crashes reveal something deeper: the ethical bankruptcy of the system. If a drug can sell for $1,000 today and $10 tomorrow, what was the real cost? What were patients paying for, if not the product itself? They were paying for access, for permission to survive. And that permission was controlled not by need, not by science, but by legal ownership. Now imagine what happens to a family paying full price for a drug in the final year of its patent protection. They might be spending thousands, only to find, months later, that the same medication is suddenly affordable. It's not just unfair, it's cruel. In any other industry, this would raise alarms. Imagine if seatbelts were locked behind patents and sold at $10,000 per car, only to drop to $50 once another company made them. Or if asthma inhalers were priced based on how desperate the patient was that day. But in pharmaceuticals, this is business as usual. The market only corrects when competition is finally allowed in, and even then, it often comes too late, after years of price gouging and billions extracted from patients, insurance systems, and public health programs. What these price collapses ultimately expose is the fragile logic of pharmaceutical pricing. It's not rooted in fairness, it's rooted in control. And control, especially over something as essential as medicine, is power. But the pharmaceutical industry doesn't just wield power through pricing. It uses law, influence, and silence. It operates in the shadows of regulation, behind a wall of media and political protection. And while prices drop after patents expire, the system itself remains intact, ready to do it all again with the next drug. Reclaiming health, a new model for medicine. For decades, the pharmaceutical industry has operated under one core assumption: that exclusivity is the price of innovation, that without long-term patents, without ironclad protection, there would be no reason to invest in new cures. And yet, what we've seen, over and over, is that this exclusivity has come at a staggering cost. It's led to inflated prices, blocked competition, and a system where access to medicine depends not on need, but on purchasing power. It's created an environment where getting sick can destroy your finances, and staying alive becomes a form of debt. And it doesn't have to be this way. What if we reimagined the entire structure? What if we preserved the incentive to innovate, but stripped away the machinery that traps patients in lifelong dependency? That's the idea behind the patent leasing model. Under this proposal, a pharmaceutical company would maintain exclusive rights for the first 5 years after a drug is approved. That means full control, full pricing freedom, and the ability to recoup development costs. But after those 5 years, the model shifts. The company would be required to license the patent to any qualified manufacturer, in exchange for a fixed royalty, like 10% of revenue. It's not a free-for-all. It's structured, fair, and still profitable. The original innovator still earns income from every sale. But now, other companies can step in to produce and distribute the drug, dramatically increasing supply, lowering prices, and making the medication far more accessible. This model solves several problems at once. It maintains the reward for discovery. It encourages early return on investment. But it prevents companies from building legal fortresses that block competition for decades. And most importantly, it breaks the monopoly cycle. Drugs would no longer remain under exclusive control for 20 or 30 years. Patients wouldn't have to wait decades for affordable generics, and the market would finally begin to behave like a market, where price reflects value, not corporate leverage. Think of what this would mean in real terms. It means that a child needing a life-saving treatment wouldn't be at the mercy of $1 million price tag. It means a cancer patient could focus on healing, not on whether they can afford another round of chemotherapy. It means public health agencies could allocate resources more efficiently, reaching more people, more quickly. And for pharmaceutical companies, it still means billions in profits, just without the destruction left in their wake. Because innovation doesn't have to mean exclusion. Profit doesn't have to mean pain. There's a middle ground, one where medicine is both sustainable and humane. The patent leasing model is one idea among many. But it points toward a broader truth, that the system we've built isn't permanent. It's not law. It's not science. It's a choice. And we can choose something different. We can demand transparency in clinical trials. We can push for real oversight on drug pricing. We can stop the revolving door between regulators and the companies they're supposed to monitor. We can end direct-to-consumer pharmaceutical advertising and shift public funding toward independent research. We can break the alliance between Big Food and Big Pharma by redefining what public health really means, from prevention to treatment to recovery. But it starts with recognizing the truth, that the current system is not built for our health. It's built for revenue. It doesn't want you cured. It wants you medicated. It doesn't want you well. It wants you managed. And it's time to stop accepting that as normal. Because health isn't just the absence of disease. It's not something you buy, one prescription at a time. It's something you build through access, education, and the freedom to live without fear of financial collapse. Medicine should be a tool for liberation, not dependency. And the industry that produces it should be held to a higher standard. Not because we expect less of them, but because we expect more of ourselves. The crisis is real, but so is the opportunity. We've exposed the dark truth. Now it's time to ask, what kind of future do we want to build in its place? Because health is not a luxury, it's a human right, and it's worth fighting for.